one continent, 54 nations. Yet for many Africans, crossing their own region is harder than flying to Europe. A Ghanaian businessperson traveling to Senegal, for example, must apply for a visa, submit documents, and often wait weeks for approval. This is the everyday reality for Africans trying to move within their own continent, a reminder that colonial borders still shape the present. Welcome to the Africa Briefing Room, where we break down the issues shaping the continent. In this briefing, we examine why travel within Africa remains so difficult, and what these hurdles reveal about broader issues of integration, economics, and political will. Visa requirements. The idea of African unity is often celebrated, but the continent's visa requirements tell a different story. Only a handful of nations offer visa-free access to all African citizens. According to the 2024 Africa Visa Openness Index, only 4 countries currently do so: Benin, the Gambia, Seychelles, and Rwanda. That's 4 out of 54 nations. In July 2025, Kenya lifted visa requirements for African nationals except those from Somalia and Libya. And in September 2025, Burkina Faso lifted visa requirements for all African nationals. By contrast, European Union citizens can move freely across 27 member states without passport checks. For many Africans, traveling to other African countries means navigating long visa applications, embassy appointments, and costly fees. Meanwhile, European travelers often face fewer requirements when visiting many African countries, though some nations, especially in Central and West Africa, still require them to obtain a visa. Economic interests. Bureaucracy isn't the only barrier to travel. For many African governments, visas are also a source of revenue. Application fees often range from $50 to $150 and are non-refundable, even when the application is denied. But the financial toll doesn't stop at Africa's borders. When African nationals apply to visit Europe, they face steep, non-refundable fees and some of the highest rejection rates in the world. In 2024 alone, African nationals lost over €60 million in non-refundable visa fees to European countries due to Schengen visa rejections. Yet even after clearing the visa hurdles, African travelers still face high travel costs within the continent. Intra-African flights cost 30 to 50% more than comparable flights elsewhere, largely due to the heavy burden of government taxes and fees. According to the African Airlines Association's 2024 report, average taxes and fees per international ticket are highest in West Africa at $110, followed by Central Africa at $107, Eastern Africa at $63, Southern Africa at $35, and North Africa at just $25. Notably, Gabon leads the continent with the highest international departure tax at $298, followed by Sierra Leone at $294, Nigeria at $180, Djibouti at $169, and Niger at $131. While the lowest are in Libya at $1, Malawi at $5, Lesotho at $6, Algeria at $10, and Eswatini at $14. Even for regional flights, the financial burden remains steep. Passengers pay an average of $68 in taxes, charges, and fees, roughly double what travelers pay in the Middle East or Europe. 9 of the 10 most expensive African countries for regional flights are in West Africa. At its 81st annual general meeting in New Delhi in June 2025, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, sounded the alarm on the cost of doing business in Africa's skies. Fuel costs are 17% higher than the world average, making up 40% of total operating expenses, compared to just 25% globally. Taxes, fees, and charges are 12 to 15% higher than in other regions. Air navigation charges are about 10% higher, while maintenance, insurance, and cost of capital, the price airlines pay to borrow money for buying planes or funding their business, run 6 to 10% above the global average. Overall, operating an airline in Africa remains significantly more costly than in most other regions, which presents an ongoing challenge for the industry's growth and competitiveness. Africa's fragmented aviation market. Despite a growing population and economy, Africa still accounts for only about 2% of global air traffic. In 2024, African airlines carried just under 100 million passengers, far less than other regions. As stated in the African Airlines Association's 2024 annual report, only 20% of African air traffic takes place within the continent. In other words, most flights connect Africa to destinations outside the region. In practice, this means many travelers must route via Europe or the Middle East just to move between African capitals, a costly detour that drives up ticket prices. As of 2025, nearly 65% of passengers traveling between Africa and other continents fly with non-African airlines, meaning most of this international revenue flows out of the continent. These economic pressures not only raise costs for travelers, but also reinforce the fragmentation of Africa's transport networks, making regional integration harder to achieve. Blocked airline funds. Across parts of Africa, airlines face another major challenge. Revenue from ticket sales often get trapped. Chronic shortages of foreign currency, combined with exchange controls and regulatory barriers, often prevent airlines from converting their local ticket sales into hard currency and transferring the funds out of the country. According to the International Air Transport Association, as of April 2025, over $1.1 billion in airline revenues were blocked across Africa and the Middle East, representing the majority of all such funds globally. Several countries on the continent account for a large share of these blocked funds, including Mozambique, $205 million, Algeria, $178 million, Angola, $84 million, and several Central African countries that use the CFA franc currency: Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, and Gabon, which together hold about $191 million. Nigeria, which previously topped the list with nearly $800 million in blocked funds, has since cleared most of its backlog as of 2024. The consequences are severe. When funds are delayed, airlines face tighter cash flows that can lead to suspended services, reduced routes, and higher fares for passengers. This discourages new investment and competition, two factors that could drive down prices. Airlines already operate on thin margins. Reliable access to their earnings is essential for covering operating costs and sustaining air service across the continent. As the International Air Transport Association puts it, when airlines can't access their own revenues, they're forced to reduce capacity or exit markets altogether. Blocked funds don't just hurt airlines, they hurt connectivity, competition, and passenger choice. As long as this bottleneck persists, efforts by major airlines and governments to expand intra-African air travel, from launching new routes to upgrading infrastructure, will remain constrained. And while financial barriers remain a pressing challenge, the continent's route networks themselves still reflect the imprint of colonial-era infrastructure. Colonial infrastructure, built outward, not across. Colonial-era transportation networks were designed to move resources, like minerals and crops, from inland production zones to coastal ports for export, prioritizing the needs of European markets over regional connectivity or African development. The Kenya-Uganda Railway, laid down by the British between 1896 and 1901, drove a direct line from Uganda's resource-rich hinterland straight to the port of Mombasa, built not for local connectivity but for extraction. In West Africa, the French built the Dakar-Niger Railway in the 1890s, a 1,287-kilometer line running from the port of Dakar in Senegal to the Niger River in Mali, designed to export peanuts, gold, and other raw materials. Territories in between functioned as transit corridors rather than regional hubs. After independence, this infrastructure largely remained intact. International passenger service between Senegal and Mali on the Dakar-Niger line ended in 2010, after a fatal derailment, exposing deeper issues: century-old rails, chronic underinvestment in maintenance, and privatization under World Bank pressure that prioritized freight profits over passenger service. Transrail, the private operator, focused on lucrative freight exports while neglecting passenger obligations, highlighting how colonial-era systems built for extraction continue to hinder regional integration. Because these lines were never extended into cross-border networks, much of Africa still lacks continuous rail or road connections between neighboring countries. Direct rail travel across borders is rare, without changing trains or systems. While buses can cross borders, travelers still face hurdles such as lengthy border checks and varying road conditions. This infrastructural legacy continues to limit mobility, raise trade costs, and reinforce Africa's dependence on external rather than intra-African connections. Today, policy choices will determine whether those colonial-era routes can be reoriented toward integration or remain barriers to it. Policy implementation, progress, and setbacks. And then there are the promises, ambitious but still largely unfulfilled. The African Union launched its African Passport Initiative in 2016, with plans to make it available continent-wide by 2020, later postponed to 2024. Yet as of 2025, it remains limited mainly to diplomats and government officials. Similarly, the Single African Air Transport Market, launched in 2018 under the African Union's Agenda 2063, to liberalized airspace, allowing airlines from member countries to operate freely between African cities. In short, an open skies policy for the continent. As of 2025, while 38 countries have signed the agreement, only 18 have fully ratified and implemented the policy. Countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Malawi are leading the way, opening their markets and signing new route agreements. These commitments have begun to create new business and tourism opportunities, making affordable air travel accessible to more people and increasing mobility across the continent. Research by the International Air Transport Association found that, even if only 12 countries fully participated, the economic impact would be substantial. $1.3 billion in additional combined GDP and 155,000 new jobs created across those economies. But despite strong political commitment, challenges remain. Countries are still working through differences in regulations, financial risks, and infrastructure gaps. In closing, Africa's aviation sector stands at a crossroads. While initiatives like the Single African Air Transport Market are opening new possibilities for connectivity and growth, the journey is far from complete. Major hurdles remain, including infrastructure gaps, high operating costs, visa requirements, and blocked funds that continue to limit access and opportunity for millions. Tackling these challenges will require coordinated reforms from governments, regional organizations, and industry leaders. This means aligning regulations, modernizing infrastructure, and, crucially, fostering competition and attracting investment to help make travel truly affordable. Reducing taxes and fees, supporting low-cost carriers, and harmonizing standards are all proven steps to lower costs and expand opportunity. Only through sustained collaboration and innovation can Africa's skies become truly open, connected, unlocking mobility, boosting trade, and giving all Africans the freedom to move across their continent.